and it's the only movie as a kid that I thought captured how scary childhood felt. You know, it really felt chaotic and insane, and I thought, yeah, that's how it feels all week long. But you know, it stayed with me, and yeah, it was the second movie I saw with my mom, I believe. The first one was Wuthering Heights. I don't know why. I remember that I was so scared, I fell asleep, and when I woke up, Laurence Olivier was still there. I didn't know why or how she took me there. I remember the cinema, which is now a parking lot in my hometown. But then we saw Pinocchio. It was on re-release, and we saw it in the theater. And on Sundays, then you would have, on Channel 6, you would have all day American movies, subtitled, and on Channel 4, you would have all day Mexican movies. So Sundays were a mixture of religion and weirdness. You would see Astro Boy mixed with a Christopher Lee movie, mixed with one of Creature from the Black Lagoon. And Pinocchio stayed in the sort of fundamental imaginary in my head, along with Frankenstein and Creature from the Black Lagoon. Pinocchio, Frankenstein, and that are sort of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Mark, what about you? What was
Well, I'm trying to think which story I should tell at this point.
How many kids are here? Oh, no, that'll be all the story.
I really didn't know much about Pinocchio. It wasn't part of, you know, it wasn't that movie for me. And in fact, the first time I saw it was when my mom took me to see The Erotic Adventures of Pinocchio. I'm kidding. No, it wasn't one of those movies for me. I mean, obviously I was aware of it as a cultural phenomenon. But when I heard what Guillermo and Patrick were intending to do with the story, that's when I got excited about it. It seemed so different from everything that I had heard about Pinocchio, and it's a unique take that I thought, wow, this is definitely a story that's worth telling again.
And it absolutely.
When it started in 2004, one thing happened. Chris Greenlee designed the basic Pinocchio that you see. We made variances with Guy Davis, but when I met with Chris and I said, that's a great Pinocchio, why does it look like that? And he said, Geppetto was drunk. And I thought, oh, the sky's parted. Because I knew I wanted to mix fairy tales with sort of social relevant things for the thematic of each fairy tale. But when I heard that, I thought it is the perfect way to do a movie about imperfect fathers and imperfect sons. And sort of a movie full of forgiveness in a way. And we agreed from the beginning to drag Geppetto. It's almost the adventures of Geppetto, because it's not Pinocchio learning to be a real boy, but Geppetto learning to be a real father. And I think that's really a much more interesting lesson for us. And when Greece was first doing one version, very different from this, is Geppetto was very cartoony, very elongated, very spindly, and when we changed, and I started with Pat McHale and you know, Mark and I said, we gotta do Richard Harris in the movie called The River, you know, where he looks really rough, and the hands were particularly important. They needed to look like the hands of somebody that carved wood, sort of rough, and that also said, well, this guy is not very expressive. He gets drunk, and then all the rage and all his nature comes out, and he gotta learn to love. Because what I didn't like about Pinocchio, I didn't like obedience, first of all. I hate obedience. I think disobedience is fundamental, and with my kids, for many years they said, I would say good, you know, when they did bad things. I'm divorced, second marriage. That didn't happen in the house. But I think disobedience is the beginning of thought and self. Because you say, no, I don't believe this, I believe this. And even if you're wrong, it builds you. And the other thing was, I hated that Pinocchio had to change to be loved. I thought he has to be loved exactly Well, Mark, for a long time, I don't know, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? I never asked you. All those times when you saw this fat fuck is crazy.
No, but I'm used to rejection, so the pattern felt very natural, and I was very comfortable with it, yeah.
Especially in animation, stop motion.
That's right, yeah, because everybody, they almost said no gleefully.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, they called us for meetings. They said, oh, you're making a Pinocchio, we're doing it. Well, we should take a meeting. No, it's not necessary. I said, it is. Then we were going and it's about death. And Pinocchio dies several times, everybody dies at the end, and it's about the rise of Mussolini. they would validate our parking and send us on our way. Basically what I mean, I'm the worst. My father had used cars dealerships, and I worked with him 2 years. I couldn't sell a single car. He would say, how is this car? And I would go, not so good. I really go in and teach truthfully the movie, because the only time I had a problem was on Mimic, where we were making two different movies, and I said, look, better for them to say no to the right film than to say yes to the wrong film. And they would say, is it for kids? And I said, no, but kids can watch it. You know, it's very different. We don't want to make a babysitter movie. We want to make a movie with themes and death and pain and redemption and love and all that. As I was saying, all those things that were validating in the parking lot. And it felt, I mean, I've written or co-written 32, 33 screenplays. I've done 12 movies. So that means there are about 20 screenplays that will never get made, I think. But they're in the drawer. They are in the prestige drawer. And now and then you meet somebody, and Troll Hunters, which I did with DreamWorks and Netflix, had been a big success for them. Ted Sarandos saw that I was implicated from episode 1 to the final episode, and I was always there, and I was responsible for it. He knew I was gonna really deliver an animation, and he said in the room, yeah. He saw and I said, it's about the rise of Mussolini, everything that was reasons to say no. And he said, it sounds cool. It does, doesn't it?
The look.
Yeah, I mean, we had a fabulous director of photography, Frank Passingham, and he's very, very clever with his use of light. And one of the things he did was he came up with this notion of these gobos that move in front of the lights that create shadows, and we actually animate them on landscapes and when there's big windows, through windows, so the light itself is moving, and even it's very, very subtle. What it does is it takes these miniatures and it makes them feel alive in a way that you just can't get normally in stop motion. So yeah, brilliant man, brought a lot to the table.
Yeah.
You know, in the production design, one of the things I do try to do in my movies is not to do cute stylization just for it. I always say we don't want to make eye candy, we want to make eye protein. We want to nurture the story with the look. If something looks cool but doesn't tell you the right thing, it shouldn't be done. And I think stylization for stylization is a disease. And what we ask from the beginning and supervise painstakingly is anything on the screen except for the magical sign needed to have photo reference. The only movie we saw was Fellini's Amarcord. And I said, this is the size of the town, this is the feel. And I think, you want to talk about Kurt and his little history of the town?
Oh yeah, one of our two production designers came up with a whole history of Geppetto's town. He said, well, here, there was an invasion at this point, and there was an earthquake at this point, and there was, the whole thing down through, a couple hundred years. And so when we were building things, we knew why this wall had fallen down, and part of it had been rebuilt. And it seems on the surface as kind of a ridiculous pursuit, but it grounds everything, and it really helps it feel true in a way.
I think that you need one anomaly per movie, and that anomaly can lead to other things. Like
That was
Pinocchio.
me.
Only when you dance, buddy. That anomaly leads to another world. Like Pinocchio leads you to death and life, and the cricket and the fish and all that, but it has to be through him. In this case, comes from Carlo, whose scarf is blue, and if you see the movie again, everything in the other world is blue. The cricket, the rabbits, the sphinx, the life-giving one, the death, even the fish, which in my head is a test. It's not a real fish, it's a test for Pinocchio. And if you see, the town is like designing wardrobe, is the wardrobe for Geppetto has been patched everywhere, and is aged. So we know that he doesn't have money for new pants, and he needs to repair them. And the town, when you see a town that has layers of history, you say it's a real town. You know, it's a way to tell the story without you realizing. It's like, instead of showing the war, we show dogs, stray dogs that are mutilated, they lost a leg, or they're scrawny, and you get a sense of the war existing in the horizon, far away, but the consequences are there. So production design is storytelling. Wardrobe is storytelling. You tell something about a character, and like if you watch, I was painting models before I came here. I have streaks of acrylic paint. I'm not exactly a sharp dresser, so I don't give a fuck. Except that my wife gave me this scarf. That's why it's nice. But you're telling a story, and when you feather your nest or create an environment in which you live, you're telling people who you are. We all want to be surrounded by things that reaffirm or confront who we are, and therefore there's not such a thing as look and story. It's one and the same.
Love that. I want to talk about one shot.
Well, first of all, the animation, that's where we said we got it, because it was a very difficult project.
Yeah, we had, Oliver did a lot of the scenes in the animator in the church, and those are really quiet moments. There's not a lot going on, it's not overperformed, but we needed precision, and we needed truth out of that character, and we worked for a long time to get there, and Oliver seemed to really understand the nature of that scene, and it's a really important scene in the film. It's a turning point, and it's the point where Geppetto starts to recognize that maybe Pinocchio is someone he wants in his life, and that's where he offers him the book. So we had to get it just right.
You're talking about the bomb, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that one, Carlo, the closer the design is to human faces, the harder it is to animate. First of all, because you don't have, like this face has a bunch of little levers or pallets that are articulated, so if you want to lift an eyebrow, you can lift an eyebrow. You want to lower it, you can lower it. And it's all over the face. But he has a lot of craggy lines and surfaces. The face of a kid, there's nothing that hides the bending of the silicone. So it's harder. But also, you have to skateboard around the edges of Uncanny Valley. You don't want to make it creepy. That kid was really difficult to animate, to find expression. And that was the shot where we knew we got it. When he looks up and he does a little bit of a wince, tiny. And it is for me, I think tragedy is, I think the cosmos writes a letter. It's up to you to read it and know what it means. And I think, and I believe that those that go away from our lives do it so they can stay with us forever. And I think Carlo and Geppetto, this is a moment where he relates to Christ, and later Pinocchio will say, "Why do they like him and not me?" And naturally, I was trying to link all those things, and the bomb is a godsend. If you read the book of Job, the will of the cosmos doesn't have to answer to your proportion. But it was necessary for Geppetto to grow. It was necessary for that love to exist, that bomb failed. So it feels like a moment of grace it feels like a moment of grace, and you know, all these elements. I'm a lapsed Catholic, which means I'm a Catholic that pretends he's not a Catholic. But so was Collodi. Collodi was studying to be a priest, or wanted to study to be a priest, and his original Pinocchio is full of Catholic or Christian references. Pinocchio in the whale is Jonah and the whale. Greece's design included the nails, which immediately helped that symbology. So it's a moment of mystery. I think that one of the things that hint at spirituality and is humbling in our lives is mystery. We want to know everything, and that is so diminishing. I think we have to surrender to mystery now and then, and to the beauty of things that are impossible, and that's a moment of grace, which is a terrible moment, but a moment of grace. And if you see the movie, Geppetto cannot encompass the loss of Carlo, and at the end, death comes naturally. And the way Pinocchio leaves the flowers on the grave is a very small smile. There's a wisdom to Pinocchio, the way he moves. So these whole things are of a piece, both visually and screenplay-wise.
And Carlo was an immensely important character to us because it's sort of one thing that makes our version unique in a way. We really wanted to explore that relationship because we felt it was important that we understood his grief, and not just from a logical point of view, but from an emotional point of view, that you feel his grief. So we had to spend time with Carlo and see their relationship. But what we did was we did it in the form of a sort of a musical montage for the most part. So it's not really clear whether that was actually their relationship or this romanticized vision of it that Geppetto had, because he's remembering it in the same way we remember those that maybe we've lost. You know, it starts to, everything was rosy and beautiful and wonderful. So then that's the thing that Pinocchio ultimately has to compare to. He can never live up to this sort of idealized, beautiful version of a child that Geppetto has probably, to an extent, created in his mind. And it's something that I think we all, come up against at different points in our life.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that, the mystery that we try to solve is family. They break us when we're young, and we spend the rest of our life piecing ourselves together, and we try not to pass it on. That's basically the three things we can accomplish in an entire life. Not passing it is already you change the whole generation by not doing that. But it's very hard, and I think death, as a Mexican, death is a mother. It's a nurturing figure. Death is wisdom. The desire for life is, life gives life very wantonly, just like, there you go run and be a company, and there's no education in that. We are thrown into life like that. But death can make you wise. If you know that you're here briefly, and you measure every action in your day for how you will remember that day when you are 3 minutes away from fading at the end, you're more cautious about how you go about your day. And death is the great teacher. Death says, live, be alive, be with them, be with the others. My kids tell me sometimes, they say, I said to them, the secret of happiness is the others. If you think about the others, you immediately forget yourself. And I think death does that. Death tells Pinocchio how to behave. Death tells Pinocchio, what if those that you love are not there anymore? And I think it's a movie that deals with that because, again, it's a mystery we cannot understand. Schopenhauer used to say that the greatest two mysteries are the one where we're not before we're born, and the one after we're dead, and we only ponder the second one. But really, we are surrounded by mystery. Well, it was very hard. Melissa called, sent a note, because originally he just walked into the sunset, and we philosophized about what happens, and then we're gone. And she said, "My God, is he alone? Is he?" And we had not executed the moment. We knew he was gonna smile a little, blah blah blah, but we couldn't transmit that. And Melissa, was in charge of animation, Netflix, and she said, "Is there anything?" And I thought, well, the line, he stepped into the world, and the world, I believe, embraced him back, sort of gave you a more hopeful thing, but it's not about hope, it's about wisdom. I think that wisdom is better than hope, because then you understand that the world is of a piece. The good and the bad are of a piece. When we all look for nice and good, we will invariably be disappointed. If you look for the world as it is, you won't. And I think that's the wisdom of the movie at the end. It is what it is, and then you don't have it. It's not very much the American dream, but it's a Mexican acceptance. Tequila, man. If we have done our job as storytellers, you can accept a bittersweet end because it feels true, and people accept the truth. And Pinocchio he's carrying with him everything that you just lived through with him in the movie. When he goes over that hill, he's taking all those memories and experiences with him, and I think it's quite beautiful. I remember when Guillermo decided to kill the pine cone as well, because one thing that lived through our film is the pine cone. He said, "No, kill it." But even that feels right somehow. It feels like an ending. It does. It feels like an ending. I mean, I think that there's two things that are really hard to do. One is open in a way that introduces a world that has never been and will never be, and its beauty is at the same time amazing because you gain it, but you feel that you lost it because it's never been. Miyazaki does that perfectly. When Totoro faded in, and it was the first Miyazaki movie, I knew it was a Miyazaki movie, I started weeping. Because it was impossible. That's what art does. Art does that. It tells you, you know the world well, let me present it to you in a way that you'll never see it. And then the second most difficult thing is to end with a note of grace. And the pinecone is sort of the flower blooming at the end of Pan's Labyrinth, which is just a little thing, but after you did that whole journey, it's important. I think that's a good way to finish.
Influenced.
Nightmare came first in the design, and Guy Davis traveled with that whole archive of carnivals around the same era. And Kurt already had an immense wealth of information and images. So they combined. In fact, if you watch the two movies together, the shot of the little guy entering the carnival with a wheel of fortune lying in front of him is the same as Gustafson entering the carnival with a wheel of fortune lying in front of him. Let's do the same introduction. But they had to be in a tactile way a little different because the carnival, the color palette in Nanorandi was different than here. But we used the reds there. Reds are very controlled in the film. We use them only to sort of harbingers of doom with the fascists and the attraction of the limelight and stuff like that. But we did an intense amount of research, and that was, the hardest thing on animation is the extras. They always suck. Right? And we needed to give you the feeling that this was a big carnival. We did it with how many extras?
Well, it was probably only about 8.
Yeah, and the semi-dimensional puppets, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we wound up, because one of the things we tried to do was do everything in camera as much as possible. Obviously, compositing certain things and expanding the world, but in terms of characters, we came up with this idea, I don't know if it was was completely original, but we were using like 2.5D characters, like versions of these puppets, which if you look down, they would only be about an inch thick, and they had images sort of printed on them, and they with these sort of dead stares on their faces, and of course we're like, okay, they go way in the background. They're great. They just fill out the world, and then of course what happens is the deeper you get into production, and the more you need. Oh, we need characters here and here, and then they get closer and closer to camera, and it's sort of shocking. Horrible. Yeah.
But the same happens in CG. I mean, you can only generate so many characters, and it's like Mr. Potato Head. With a mustache and glasses on, but it's the same puppets. Also in CG. On Troll Hunters, we have one goddamn troll walking in the troll market over and over again. And finally, I said, let him say whatever.
And our puppets were very gender fluid. You know, men would play women and women would play men, and it was a
Pretty
party
advanced
every
that
day.
little town in Italy.
And Kate Blanchett voices the monkey.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, that came from Manorelli. We were shooting the last day of her office in Manorelli, and she said, we gotta work again, this is too much fun. What, do you have anything on Pinocchio? I said, there's nothing, everything has been given, and I said, there's a monkey. And I said, I'll do it. When I sent her the drawing of the monkey, she said, this is me. This is my spirit animal. Because Kate has a side that is incredibly hard to guess. You see her and she looks like a duchess that has read all the books and incredibly sophisticated, but she has a raunchy side that is so I think the monkey represented her. When we were recording the voices in London, you remember a Warner Brothers cartoon where the coyote and a sheepdog cross? I say, good morning, Ralph, good morning. That we were recording Pinocchio, and then we would cross with Top Field saying, recording Tar. Good morning, Tar. And so we go from monkey to Tar.
So there's a little bit of tar in Santa. And I think the other way around as well. We're going to take a little credit for tar.
If the Oscar, at least one finger is Spatadura.
This can go back and watch that again.
It's a complete pain in the ass. It's really hard. In stop motion, doing water is very, very difficult. So, but again, in keeping with our notion of trying to do everything in camera, we took a lot of elements like water and fire and smoke, and we did tests. Like we actually shot practical tests of how we would do it if we were going to generate all of it practically. And then we gave that to the digital artists and said, this is what fire looks like in our world. So they didn't have to guess, this is what smoke looks like. And then, water was another one, because there was so much of it in the film, thanks to the guys who wrote it. It's not easy.
But our directing the water is difficult because it has to look like it's a piece. If you put regular water, it pops. Or regular fire, it is not cohesive. So it needed to look like gelatin, but move like water. So dialing that, and for example, one of the ideas that made it even more difficult is on Pacific Rim, I did a thing where the camera broke the surface, and we're under and out. That means that you have to shoot every shot under the light of the sun, and as it moves, you need to substitute it for light underwater, which is a dry for wet blues with caustic light. And they had to do it so that when we animate the water line, the light changes. So it's incredibly complicated.
And there's caustics as well, which is this motion of light moving through water and how it moves across any sort of particular bodies. But Frank, again, our DP, he did this great stuff with multiple exposures. So there might be as many as 6 or 7 exposures for any one frame. So you can control all those elements and really make it look at one point like it's above and one point like it's underwater.
So to give you an example, you have photo. Then when they have the fire, he would put 2 or 3 LEDs in the torch, and he would do an exposure for that, which was timed frame by frame to flicker, and then he would do a fill light, and then he would do a moonlight, and you would do as much as it.
Yeah, and it would drive animators nuts because they shoot a frame and then they wait. All these exposures happen before they can move on to the next frame. So all these things, this is why stop motion takes forever and is probably not a good idea.
Well, and this is why it's so hard. I mean, you have to understand that the industry of animation is an incredibly conservative industry. And what we did is, if you see it again, the way it's staged with the camera and the way the actors act is really naturalistic, which is rare. Animation tends to push everything to sort of sitcom rhythms or screwball rhythms. And I think that is, in my opinion, a limit that we need to break through. And we need to seek realistic acting, which means that in real life, nothing happens as smooth and in one movement. It takes 3 or 4 clumsy moves. Geppetto sits on the bench, and then he has to scooch over. Now, because animation in a good week, an animator gives you 3 seconds, that means that you have to justify to the studio that you're gonna spend weeks or months and months animating things that were unnecessary. But they are necessary for you to think 20 minutes in that these are actors, not puppets. And for you to feel for them as if they were humans, and that creates the emotion. And I think it sounds simple, but every month we would have to justify why a scene that was X number of seconds. You want to talk about how long it takes to shoot these things?
Oh my God, it takes forever. Yeah, but there's it's easy to convey an emotion with a sort of a shortcut, which is a lot of times what animation does, because it's something that you can do, and it's like, oh, this character's happy, the character's sad. But there's another level that involves a lot more subtlety. That's really hard to get at and requires a lot of faith in your artists, in the animators. And we had amazing animators, really, really great. And everybody really got on board with this notion of, we have to, when we look at the character, we have to see in their eyes what they're thinking and feeling. It's not about movement, it's not about motion, it's about emotion. So we really, really focused on that to bring these characters to life in a very different way. We didn't take shortcuts. And our animators really got on board with that, and they understood that. And they are actors, and they're pretty sophisticated actors as well. And we've discovered some really, really good new talent as well for this film.
A lot of the people that were doing, for example, 2 things, because I think moving the needle in the industry, people do representation or equality as gestures, but they don't protect those gestures. So they're just thrown into a census. Or we have this number of people that are, what we did is we created an entire studio in Mexico for animators from Mexico to animate the sequences with the rabbits and the final dance of the cricket, for animators and Mexican animators to touch Pinocchio, the cricket, the main characters. And we were involved from the construction of the studio and the design of the studio all the way. About 45% of our workforce was female, and we gave the first shot at key animation to many female animators, because it's a bit of a sausage fest animation. And I think you can only break it if you really not only say we're going to employ these people, but we're going to employ them to their benefit. You're going to protect the environment to really give them things that count.
It's not like it was a sacrifice. These female animators just brought amazing things to it. I've been doing this forever, and Guillermo's right, it is a kind of a sausage fest. So we try to change that.
It's a technical term.
Yeah.
We talk like that in movies.
And I think it was to our benefit. We got some fantastic new animators out of it. So, and then it's always exciting to discover new talent. We found people who had just been doing a lot of television, and so they've been animating very, very quickly. But you can tell when you look at someone's reel, there's something there. Take that person, you nurture them a little bit, you slow them down, you give them the best direction you can, and you create a safe space for them to animate in. Because the worst thing is an animator who is fearful, because you're not going to get a good performance. They're always going to take this sort of safe route. Well, this will do it, this will get there. We didn't want that. We wanted to take some chances. We wanted the animators to feel like they could take some chances with the performances and risk failure. It was okay. We're gonna have your back on this. And it just created, I think, an environment where people felt way more empowered to express themselves and experiment, and we got amazing stuff.
Really quick, we credited the animators in the front credits. I don't know if you noticed that. They're credited before the voice cast. Main credits, because they're not technicians, they're artists. And they are cast. They are not people doing roto or they're cast. And the second thing that is really important is in animation, half of the voice has been lost. When you think about animation, in the history of animation, you hear the names of the guys. And many, many animator women have died in the trenches doing extraordinary things and never been recognized. In Fleischer, UPA, Disney, the income tax department, of course, but Millicent Patrick. For every Mary Blair that you know, there's a Millicent Patrick that has not been recognized. And it is incredibly brutal, not only as a matter of equality, but as a matter of artistry. Some of the best shots were female animators that were coming to do a character for the first time. And I think it's not a lofty gesture, it's a necessary gesture to make this art complete. So, whatever the fuck I was. I haven't had lunch.